Shabbat shalom, everybody. Thank you, Ross. And now some Torah. Rabbi Tzadok told me an incredible story this week that many of you may have heard before. It's about the legendary jazz pianist Keith Jarrett, who played a concert one night that would alter the course of musical history. It was an evening in 1975, and Jarrett was to give a recital at the Grand Opera House in Cologne. Jarrett has perfect pitch and very specific preferences about pianos, and he had requested a very particular grand piano for that concert. But the Opera House staff made a mistake and had set up a small, dilapidated piano that was completely out of tune. On top of this, Jarrett suffered from terrible back pain and also happened to be utterly exhausted after driving for 6 hours from Zurich to get to the concert hall. Under these conditions, Jarrett nearly canceled the concert. But after his promoter adamantly encouraged him to perform anyway, Jarrett ended up playing. And that night, on an out-of-tune piano with broken pedals and through searing back pain and fatigue, Jarrett brilliantly improvised two of the most astounding pieces of music. Because of the broken instrument, Jarrett had to play the piano in a way he had never played before. One of the many articles written about this incredible performance says, in the end, the less than perfect piano, which Jarrett initially thought was his worst nightmare, turned out to be a blessing and a boon rather than a curse. I love this story, and I know many others do too, because it expresses a fascinating truth, which is that creativity actually flourishes out of constriction and even pain. You and I, our community, our city, our country, even the whole world, have been living through a time of great constriction and pain. We were already grappling with multiple crises when our world was struck by a pandemic that has required all of us to limit and even halt most of the ways we used to live. Our movement and our travel are restricted. We need to wear masks covering our nose and mouth. We need to wait in lines before entering only essential businesses, if we're even able to go. We need to wait. Many of us haven't been able to hug or even feel the warmth of our loved ones in months. Our options for eating, working, playing, gathering, protesting, celebrating, and mourning have been reduced to what is safe. We have been forced to play on a dilapidated, out-of-tune piano. And on top of this, we've had to play through the pain and fatigue that comes from still having to reckon with the broken and racist health, criminal justice, housing, employment, and welfare systems that are failing to care for the poor, unemployed, and afflicted people all across this country. It's just too much to sustain. And I know that so many of us would rather just give up in one way or another, just not play. But I've also seen in this time of great constriction a tremendous flourishing of creativity. Toward the beginning of quarantine, one of ICAR's beloved ICAR members began painting colorful cardboard signs with greetings like, "You are a treasure," and "I'm so glad you are my neighbor," and "nice mask." She takes walks and places the signs around her neighborhood for whoever walks by to see. This is one of the many delightful gestures of creativity that I've seen burst through the pain and challenge of this time. I have seen musicians playing on street corners, balconies, and subways for passersby. I've seen spontaneous, socially distanced line dances in the street. I have seen magnificent art made from home harvested materials. I have seen a string quartet perform to a concert hall packed not with people, but with house plants. I have seen a Parisian cafe place giant teddy bears at alternating tables to keep guests at a safe distance. I've watched people tend their gardens and help new plants grow. And I have seen singers from around the world creating the most exquisite music together, thousands of miles apart. And I will also mention that I have taken my own sidewalk chalk skills to a whole new level. Creativity flourishes out of constriction and even pain. I learned this truth not only from Keith Jarrett performing a masterpiece on a broken piano, and from the creativity that is sprouting forth during this national upheaval and pandemic. I also learned this truth from the practice of Shabbat. Shabbat is specifically designed to halt creative action. The commandments that shape the seventh day are mostly restrictions. One may not light a flame, cook, write, or erase. And on Shabbat, one is essentially supposed to shelter in place. Besides gathering with community for services, our rabbis teach that we're not supposed to travel on Shabbat. Because of these restrictions, Shabbat can actually feel really constricting to many of us. My daughter resents that Shabbat doesn't let her paint. My son often says, I can't wait for Shabbat to leave so we can just do stuff. And even I start to look at the clock on Shabbat afternoon, eagerly waiting to write or just do something productive. But one of my favorite commentators, the Sforno, comes to assure us. He says, Ein zo mitzvah bilvad, aval hi matana. The laws of Shabbat are not merely prohibitions, but they're actually a gift. And I think Shabbat is not only a gift, as he says, because the stopping itself lets us rest and makes our productivity that much more meaningful. But I also think the restrictions of Shabbat spark tremendous creativity. Without being able to touch a pen or a paintbrush or a keypad, we can begin to imagine new ways of writing and painting and designing. When we don't have access to the palette or the camera, we can dream up totally new color schemes. It's June now. And we're now at a stage when the world is itching to reopen, to start production again, to get back to work. But today I want to lift up one of the gifts of limits and restrictions, especially as we are seeing that as we make moves to get back to work, cases of the virus are surging. Instead of angrily ordering us all to stay home and wear our masks, I want to instead ask us to notice and appreciate the gifts and the possibilities contained within the constriction and pain of this time. There is so much beauty bursting forth, so many ideas being born. And I hope that this can give us comfort and assurance to keep moving through this together, to keep playing our hearts out, even if the piano we're playing is broken. Shabbat Shalom.